On a misty autumn afternoon, Evelyn Greer arrived at Harrow Hall, her heart filled with anticipation and dread. The sprawling estate, nestled deep in the English countryside, had been in her family for generations. Now, as the last living heir, it was hers, a place she had only heard about in whispers, a place that carried a heavy burden of secrets. Evelyn had never seen the hall before. Her father, who had distanced himself from the family, refused to speak of it, leaving her with only fragmented stories from her childhood. Yet, when the letter arrived informing her of her inheritance, something inside her compelled her to go. The journey to Harrow Hall had been long and arduous, with the narrow roads winding through dense forests and fog-shrouded hills. When the ancient manor finally came into view, its towering stone walls loomed over the landscape, as though it were part of the earth itself. The windows were dark, the ivy-covered facade casting long shadows across the courtyard. As Evelyn stepped out of the carriage, the air was thick with the scent of damp leaves and decay. The silence was unsettling, broken only by the distant caw of a crow. She felt a shiver run down her spine as she approached the massive wooden doors. Their iron hinges rusted with age. With a deep breath, she pushed them open. Inside, the hall was dimly lit, the only light coming from the few candles that lined the walls. The air was cold, and the smell of must and dust lingered. Her footsteps echoed as she walked across the marble floor, taking in the grand yet eerie surroundings. Tapestries depicting long-forgotten battles hung from the walls, and portraits of stern-faced ancestors stared down at her with hollow eyes. Suddenly, a voice broke the silence. "Miss Greer, welcome to Harrow Hall." Evelyn turned to see an elderly man standing in the shadows. He was tall and gaunt, with thinning white hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 secrets. He introduced himself as Mr. Whitlock, the hall's caretaker. "I've been expecting you," he said, his voice as cold as the air around them. "There is much to discuss." Evelyn nodded, still trying to shake off the feeling of unease that had settled over her. She followed Mr. Whitlock through the winding corridors of the manor, the walls lined with portraits that seemed to watch her every move. They arrived at the library, a vast room filled with towering shelves of books that looked as though they hadn't been touched in decades. "This is where you'll find the answers you seek," Mr. Whitlock said, gesturing to the room. "But be warned, Miss Greer. Harrow Hall holds many secrets, some better left undisturbed." With that, he left her alone in the library, the heavy door creaking shut behind him. Evelyn was left in silence, surrounded by the weight of history. She felt a strange pull towards the books, as if they were calling out to her. With trembling hands, she reached for the nearest volume, its leather cover cracked with age. As she opened the book, a yellowed piece of paper slipped out and fluttered to the floor. Evelyn picked it up, her heart pounding. It was a letter, written in a spidery hand, dated nearly a century ago. The words were barely legible, but she could make out enough to know it was a warning of danger, of betrayal, and of a curse that had haunted her family for generations. The letter ended with a chilling sentence: "Beware the shadows, for they know your name." Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face as she read the words. She looked around the library, the shadows dancing in the flickering candlelight. The air seemed to grow colder, and she could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon her. Harrow Hall was more than just an old family estate. It was a place of darkness, of secrets buried deep within its walls. And now, those secrets were stirring, awakened by her presence.